What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 399. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources. And joining me, well, not on the line, but on the bed right next to me, it's Luis Scott-Vargas.
Hello.
Luis, I can't quite see you. How are you?
I'm doing well.
He's only a few feet away from me, but there's actually somebody in between us. We're in Japan. First things first. Luis, you and I are in Kyoto, Japan for the Pro Tour. It actually starts in the morning for us as the time of recording. And Japan's a crazy place, Luis. I've really enjoyed it so far. You and I have both been here about a week. Yeah,
it's been awesome. There's been a lot of cool stuff to do, a lot of awesome food to eat, and it is one of the more different places we have visited for the Pro Tour.
Yeah, for sure. And this is my first time here too, so I'm like, wow, this is all crazy to me. But we've got the Pro Tour coming up, and as usual, we've got some insider action here as far as Pro Tour testing goes. But this time we decided to, we got a spy in our midst. We decided to have the Ben Seck on the show. Ben, you're a longtime Magic Pro, and you actually were in the testing forum and stuff for Team Channel Fireball Fire, so you're going to be bringing that to the table. Ben, thanks for coming on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's great to be in Japan with you guys.
Yeah, and you and I have been hanging out all week and talking about Limited, and I know that you've got some of the insider info from Team Channel Fireball Fire, and I thought, well, let's bring old TBS on, and we'll do a show. Before we get into all the details, of course, I want to mention our sponsor, ChannelFireball.com. They're the place to go on the internet for all things Magic related. Whatever you need, they're going to have it. They're going to have singles. They're going to have sealed product. You can get, you can sell your cards back to them. That's a big deal here. For us limited players, we just end up with these piles of rares, right? And if you're not putting them into a standard deck, a lot of times they lose their value. Sure, there's a few that you might want to keep for your binder for, a modern deck or something, but there's so many of these mythics and stuff that are worth a bunch for a short while, and then they go away. And if you're big into drafting, well, what better way to get some money to draft some more than by selling them back to Channel Fireball? If you sell them back for store credit, you'll get a 30% bonus. You can also just get cash if you'd prefer that instead. While you're there, you can check out some awesome free content from some of the best players and content creators in the world. Also, the show is brought to you by you via the Patreon. That's right. You can go on to patreon.com/limitedresources, and you can support the show directly. We really appreciate everybody who does that. Thank you very much. All right. Speaking of the Patreon, the question of the week. If you're a patron, that's right, you get to submit questions for the question of the week. This one comes from Andrew Keaton. Now, Luis, this question's really simple and straightforward. What are the reasons to trade when blocking? And what are the reasons to attack into a possible trade? So I'm going to throw this to both of you guys. Luis, you can start off. This is obviously an open-ended question, but what comes to mind when you hear this question from Andrew?
The first one is preserving your life total. That is why you would want to make trades. Because I assume this question isn't why would you trade up? Because, if it doesn't take a lot of explanation to know why you want to trade your 2-1 for a 3-2. You're trading for a better creature. But why would you trade a 2-2 for a 2-2 or a 3-2 for a 2-2? And the first thing.
What about a 3-2 for a Hoopu?
I would definitely trade a 3-2 for a Hoopu. The first thing that pops into my mind is preserving your life total. When you're choosing whether to block, you're not just choosing whether to trade, you're choosing whether you want to not only make the trade, but also on the plus side of the balance sheet is you save 2 points of damage.
Right.
Yeah. They attack their 2-2 into your 3-2, and it's not, do I trade a 3-2 for a 2-2? It's, do I trade a 3-2 for a 2-2 and gain 2 life? Because you're going to otherwise take 2 points of damage. So that's the biggest thing. Whether you attack into a trade or an open trick, that is a little less clear. Basically, you have to be okay with the trade, and you have to be okay with them using the trick. So if they have a lot of cheap tricks, it doesn't really hurt that much for them to leave mana up. I don't mind trading there. If you suspect they have a 4-mana trick, like 4-mana kill an attacking creature, often I won't attack into that because them keeping up mana is a pretty big burden.
Right. Now, TBS, when we ask this question, especially the second half of it, which is, what are the reasons to attack into a possible trade? A way to even distill this down further would be to say, let's say you've got a creature and they've got a creature, and you could just say they trade. You could just snap your fingers like you just know they're going to block and they're going to trade. What are the reasons why you would want to do that versus why you wouldn't?
Well, it kind of depends. Sometimes you have another creature that may actually you want to keep and still attack with. And so you may want to make another trade so you can actually start attacking with the other creature which you don't want to trade with.
Right.
So that's a good reason. Also, there's some other decks that actually want to build up to go wide, right? And so you want to make sure that they're not taking advantage of cards that actually kind of like allow them to go wide. A lot of the cards like Trial of Solidarity and things like that. So you may want to trade to try and reduce the amount of creatures on the table so they can't have a build up.
Right, and that is something that you hear a lot, right? Like, oh, it's probably fine for me to kind of clear out the board here. And, I hear that a lot, and it makes perfect sense, right? Because when you think about Magic from a bigger picture perspective, the defending player, when there's multiple creatures out, almost always has the advantage and even can just prevent you from having any reasonable attacks, where if you can make some attacks and keep that board clear, you may be able to clear the way for future attacks with maybe your bigger creatures or something.
Yep. You sometimes don't want to make sure that they can't double block too much, and so like creating those overlaps are really, really important.
All right. TBS, you ready for your first crack-a-pack here on LR?
I am.
I'm excited. I can tell you're excited.
Oh, yeah, no.
Luis, less excited.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to get an invocation.
Wow. All right.
I'm just calling it right now.
I'm about as excited as I'm going to get tonight.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Luis. Disposal Mummy?
Not very good. Probably don't want to put it in my deck most of the time.
Yeah, that's the 2 and a white 2/3. Haven of Enduring Hope, 4 and a white 3/3. It's got flying and it gains 3 life when it enters the battlefield.
Yeah, this is a card that's actually gone up in my estimation as the format goes on. The format's a little slower. Evasion's actually really good. It's just a very efficient creature and generally gets through for a long time.
You like Haven of Enduring Hope, Luis?
I do. It's the kind of card that's good when your opponent's attacking you quickly because it's a good stabilizer, but it's also just good on turn 11 when the board is stalled. So.
Yeah, we know that these 5-drop slots can get a little crowded, but Haven of Enduring Hope has definitely proven itself. Countervailing Winds is next. That's the 2 and a blue counterspell. They got to pay 1 for each card in your yard, or you can cycle it for 2.
I've played this in decks. I don't necessarily want to take it early. It's something you can generally get much later and much better in decks that kind of have a way of getting things to the graveyard, like cycling decks and things like that.
Yeah. I like this card. Bitterbow Sharpshooters. This is the 4 and a green 4/4 with Vigilance and Reach. A lot of stats for a common.
Yeah, no, I think this card's very good. It's solid. It's a 5-drop for green is actually kind of replaceable, especially
very.
Yeah, when you consider cards in Amonkhet, like Colossopede and things like that. So you don't want too many 5-drops. And compared to the Evan's evasive, this isn't quite evasive. So I don't know if I'd really want to take it this early.
Yeah, I wouldn't take it first for sure, but I've played it and been happy with it. Marauding Bone Slasher is next. That's a 2 and a black 3/3 that can't block unless you control a zombie. You like that guy, TBS?
A little mediocre. I mean, it's a role player in a good zombie deck, in an aggressive deck, but I don't think it's something you need to prioritize too early.
You high on Marauding Bone Slasher, Luis?
Once I know I'm already in zombies, I'm a pretty big fan, but not a card I'm snapping off before that.
Ruin Rat, that's the 1 and a black 1/1 with Death Touch, and when it dies, you exile a card from an opponent's graveyard. Oh, by the way, I have a story about that from the GP. Well, I'll save it for a little later, but yeah, Ruin Rat.
Does it involve Destined to Lead?
Yes. It's insane.
Yeah, I know the story that Marshall's going to say. It's a great story. But Ruin Rat, it's actually, it's kind of overperformed. I mean, a lot of the cheap Death Touches generally do pretty well. They kind of are pseudo-removal. Ruin Rat's pretty good in the format because if it trades with the Eternalized creature, it basically can kill the Eternalized as well. So I actually think it's quite flexible. Again, it's not really something I want to take too early, but in the defensive black decks, it's pretty good.
All right, this next one is called Life Goes On. It's horrendous. I'm not even going to read it.
The draft should go on.
Life does not.
Granitic Titan, 4 red for a 5/4 menace, and it's got cycling 2.
This is basically the definition of filler.
Yeah. It's super medium. Seer of the Last Tomorrow. This is the 2 and a blue 1/4. You can pay blue, tap it, and discard a card to make somebody mill 3.
I've actually seen this end more games than I thought it would, but I still don't think it's very good.
Yeah, I've seen it on the battlefield more than I thought I would too, at the GP even.
Yeah, I mean, 1/3 for 3, 1/4 for 3 is not too bad. Obviously, you want to have something like Fraying Sanity in play when you have this card, but it's not bad.
Or you can have 2 of them.
That's true.
If you're Brock Parker, who did, by the way, play 2 of them in his draft deck at the GP, and it was pretty sweet. Magmaroth is next. 3 and a red for a 5/5, elemental, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a -1/-1 counter on it, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you can remove one of those counters.
It's kind of got prowess. This card's fine.
Yeah, kind of.
I think I've been happy enough playing it.
Yeah, I think it's overperformed generally. The blue-red deck's one of the better decks in the format. It doesn't have to be in blue-red, but it's generally its best there.
Steward of Solidarity. I like this card. This is the 1 and a white 2/2, and you can tap it and exert it to make a 1/1 Vigilance Warrior.
This is probably the best card so far. It's a 2-drop, which is we'll talk about later, is a premium in this format.
Right.
And
this is a good one.
Yeah, it's a good one. It combos with cards like Dauntless Haven that you may be able to get later. So I actually think it's a pretty solid pick.
Oh yeah, this is definitely the front runner right now.
Yeah, we had this pretty high, Louis. So I think we gave it a B or a B- or something.
I'd still stand by that.
It's held up, yeah. This card's pretty good too. Vizier of the Anointed. This is the 3 and a blue 2/4. And when it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a card with Eternalize or Embalm and put it in your graveyard. And then whenever you Eternalize or Embalm something, you can draw a card.
Really good in the blue-white Embalm decks, I think. Or Embalm Eternalize decks, but I don't think it's something that you need to go into too early. And a card like Steward is a little more flexible, goes in more decks. I think this only goes in really one deck.
All right,
Yep.
You agree with that?
It's a fine card, but I would take the Steward over it.
What about Hour of Eternity? This is our rare. It's the XX blue. And basically, it's a sorcery that says you get to eternalize X creatures from your graveyard.
I kind of like this card. I don't think I would take it over the Steward. This card actually is a bit of a sleeper. I know early on a lot of people thought it might cost too much. But it's actually a great late game play in a green ramp deck. And it actually has some play in cycling decks as well.
I think it's worse than Steward and worse than Vizier of the Anointed, but I do think it's a card that maybe is a little better than it looks.
We got a foil.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah?
It's a pretty good one, too. It's Vizier of the True. This is the 3 and a white 3/2, and you can exert it as it attacks. If you do, you can tap target creature an opponent controls, but that applies to all exert. Whenever you exert a creature, that happens.
This card is really good.
Yeah.
Very good.
It's a beating.
Yes. I mean, the red-white decks that feature this card are generally very, very good. It's like basically kind of a mini kind of falter overrun kind of card. I don't know if I take it over Steward. It's actually really tough because the thing about I think it's more powerful than Steward, but Steward is a 2-drop, and I think I would probably put that a little higher because I think the replacement level of a 2-drop in this format specifically is you want as many 2s as you can. You can have too many 4s.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Steward here for that reason.
I would also take the Steward. Like you said, the 2-drops are really in high demand, and these are similar power level cards, right? Like Vizier of the True and Steward of Solidarity for their mana cost are relatively similar to each other, and if that's the case, it's usually best to break the tie by taking the cheaper of the two options. So I like that too. Steward of Solidarity. Pretty good pack here too. I mean, we've got a big finisher with the Hour of Eternity and then the Vizier versus Steward, which, you won't find those in the pack together normally. It's because we got one that was a foil that we actually have to make that choice. Okay, let's get into our main topic. And that, of course, is sort of an extension of last week's show, our first impressions. Now we've had a chance to get our hands on the format even more, and we've got a chance to sort of connect with a lot of the pro teams and the pro players that we happen to know from doing our job here as coverage, or in TBS's case as a player, and Luis's place as a player as well. And TBS, you were affiliated with Team Channel Fireball Fire for this event. Like whenever you're queued, you play with them, right?
Yeah. I've played a couple pro tours in the last year, and I've been lucky enough to play with CFB Fire. They're really good limited players. They've done really well in a lot of pro tours, and so we actually have a forum on Facebook where we actually show all the decks that we're drafting on Magic Online or in real life. We actually had a Google form that we could fill in to actually...
You mean a secret Google form?
A secret Google form.
It sounds cooler.
and basically, it's just a questionnaire of what deck did you play, how did you do with it, any comments that you make. And so we get to aggregate all that information. And, I would say within the first like week or so, we had about 120 drafts worth of information already. And that's really a huge edge that you can get early on in the format.
Now, is this information? Is it aggregated? Is it parsed? Do you put it into a thing where you can look at it in a bigger picture, or is it kind of up to each of you to go through, look at the decks, read the notes that the players put in, and start to form conclusions on a bigger picture based on that?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of information that, like, kind of data crunching that we do with colors and, like, kind of win rates with that, but we try not to put too much information on the specific decks, because each deck is so unique in many ways, and so I think we want to know which colors are good, which styles are good, which combinations are working.
Yeah, and you mean each deck, even within an archetype?
Yeah, that's right.
Is has significant differences from the other ones, where you can't just say, well, it's red white.
Right.
I see.
Yeah.
And then also, of course, the players, it was such a short period of time where you can't get these huge sample sizes. You don't have access to just databases full of drafts and information like that. You guys are leaning pretty hard on your skill, right? Your intuition, your experience, to be able to extrapolate information from a relatively small sample.
Right. I mean, I think one of the things that people have natural biases about how they play limited. Some players are aggressive. Some people like play a lot of colors. Some people like to play control cards. And so we need to make sure that we use all this data to try and untether our biases away from what we normally play.
Do you keep each other in check?
A little bit. I mean, we have some discussions on cards that we agree or disagree on. If someone's forcing a color combination or a certain card, we'll say, hey, why are you playing this card all the time? But I mean, we're not trying to one up each other. We're not trying to kind of prove each other wrong. We're just trying to find what is the kind of the best read on the format. And so we generally don't get too competitive that way.
Luis, TBS makes it sound like a well-oiled, organized machine over there.
Well, we've been to some of the limited meetings. It's not quite that smooth, but I do agree that people's goals are aligned.
Right.
You're not looking to prove someone wrong or one-up each other. Ultimately, every person there wants to find the best limited strategy with the knowledge that, yes, some things do lend themselves to play styles or certain predilections, so it's going to be a little different from player to player. But ultimately, yeah, all the players are looking for what is a good basic strategy, and what are the nuances that go on top of that to make them prepared for the Pro Tour, to make them prepared to do these, hopefully, 2 drafts. And I think that, yeah, the meetings themselves can be a little hectic, but I think that's good. It's just a sign of healthy debate.
Oh, and it's great. Luis and I usually get a chance to go in. We were in a little bit late here to actually make it. Thankfully, we have TBS here to guide us. But the debate in those meetings is absolutely fantastic, and it's really fun to be a fly on the wall for those when I get a chance to do it. So, when we talk about limited on the show, on a show-to-show basis, our goal, of course, is to help you improve. And that's what we're trying to do, is to give you the tools that you need to improve. Now, a lot of times that's a more baseline stance, meaning something like what we do on the set review, or teaching a strategy that's going to help get you, a big chunk of win percentage if you're playing kind of looser, if you don't understand the fundamentals. But here on this one, we get to go much deeper than that, because now we're talking about professional level players and the information that they're getting. And when you're talking about that, you're dealing with people that are making a lot of assumptions, right? If you're on a pro testing team, you're not going to be teaching sort of the basic fundamentals of limited to most of these players, because they probably know them, or at least know them enough if they've gotten to this point. So this is a much deeper dive, where the players are going into much more nuanced and contextual view on these sets. And this is the view that you're going to get on this show, at least for Hour of Devastation. So why don't we get into some of the individual, more narrowed down details and stuff. One of them we already touched on a little bit here, which was the 2-drops, right? We all kind of decided to take this Steward of Solidarity over the Vizier, of the True. And the thinking was, well, 2-drops are really important. That was something that came out of the team meeting as well. Yeah.
So one of the things that was true of Amonkhet was the decks were generally pretty fast. Yeah. One of the realities of Hour of Devastation draft is the format slowed down. The more expensive cards are more powerful in this format and can kind of bring back from the brink. But that doesn't mean that getting to the board fast and kind of putting pressure on an opponent isn't valuable. In fact, it's really, really important to actually making profitable trades later on when they're at lower life and they actually have to kind of like block when they don't want to block, especially in a format with Afflict, especially in a format that doesn't actually have that many 2-drops. That's one of the reasons why I think some of the strategies that the team wanted to push were the ones that were good with 2-drops. Green, white, red, white. Those are two archetypes that really push 2-drops and have the best ones.
Right. And as a result, it really does shape the way that the actual draft goes, right? Because when you have a shortage of a resource like that, like two mana creatures or whatever, you really do need to focus in and get them, because if you don't get critical mass in your deck can be so much significantly worse that sometimes you even prioritize them over, objectively more powerful creatures, which is kind of weird.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. You don't want to, you can basically never have enough too many 2-drops, but you can have too many 3-drops, 4-drops, and 5-drops.
Right.
It's just, obviously there is a logical limit, but that limit is much, much like higher than the other drops.
And where you see that lead also is decks play fewer of them, and some decks are built with that in mind. That it both opens the door for you not to play 2-drops in your deck, and opens the door for you to play decks that aren't good against 2-drops because your opponents aren't going to have them as often either. If you remember Amonkhet, when you were on the draw and didn't have a 2-drop, it already felt like you had lost.
It felt so bad.
Sometimes your opponent even have a 1-drop. They'd have 2 creatures on the board before you have a single play.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 even. And that's just not as much the case anymore. It does make 2-drops still very important, because if you're on the play and have a 2-drop and they don't have a 2-drop, and then you play another creature on turn 3 and then they get their first creature on the board, you're just going to run them over. But you're going to face opponents who just don't play anything on turn 2, and because there are fewer 2-drops to go around, if you're not prioritizing them, that could be you. So it kind of sets up an interesting paradigm where you want 2s if you're playing a fast deck, but you also know that if you don't get 2s, you can actually survive because your opponents aren't going to have that many 2s either, or they're going to have fewer of them than they would otherwise.
We talked about the green-white deck a fair bit, when we were kind of prepping for the show, and a little bit earlier in the show as well, as being kind of one of the decks, as a prime example of a deck that really craves these 2-drops. What are the ones that jump out, at least from the limited meeting?
Yeah, so there's 2 common ones that are really high on their pick order. One is a Kettra's Avenger, the 3/1 exert creature that when you exert it, it prevents all the damage to it. And also Ronus's Stalwart.
Right.
That's the 2/2 that can become 3/3 and can't be blocked by creatures of power 2 or less. And so those are 2 common high power 2-drops. And it's really kind of the backbone of the green-white deck. And the green-white deck really is a go-wide deck, but it also needs to hit its curve. It's kind of like it wants to get as many creatures as possible. It has a few ways of paying off that, one with Overcome, and the other being the
Appeal to Authority.
Yeah, Appeal to Authority, both of which really want you to go wide. And those cards kind of don't fit in other decks. Is actually the good thing about, like, Overcome, while it's very much like Overrun, is a power level that means that you don't really want to play it in these kind of mid-range decks. It's not bad, but it's not great either. And so it's better in these kind of go-wide decks, obviously.
Right, where it's like your curve top, or where you can really leverage a bunch of tokens or whatever. And, you mentioned Appeal to Authority, which is a card that really has a wide range of power level depending on what deck you put it in. If you just put it into a random, say, green-white mid-range deck, with like an okay, maybe even a bad curve a little bit, you'll find it's not great. If you're behind, it's just awful. It doesn't really do anything. And if you're at parity, it might get you kind of, a little bit of damage in, or maybe a lot of damage in, but maybe doesn't win you the game. If you're ahead, it's just a smasher no matter what. But if you put it into this curve out deck, right, this 2-drops, heavy on 2-drops, play a 2-drop, play a 3-drop, play 2-2-drops, that type of deck, that thing smashes. It feels Overrun-ish.
Oh, yeah. I actually think it's probably better than Overcome in the green-white deck. And on top of it, the vigilance part of Authority is not to be trifled with. It allows you to obviously exert in situations that you usually would cost you a turn. And the tapping 2 creatures means that they're often forced to block with their best creature when they don't want to.
Right. And you can force through so much damage. And really, like you said, they have to block. And not only that, they're often chump blocking and still taking something. It's really, really tough to beat that. But again, you want to leverage cards like that in decks that really want it, like a deck that wants to curve out with a bunch of creatures, combat tricks, removal spells, a real low to the ground. We call it a cab style deck on the show, right? Cards that affect the board state. Every card in your deck, this isn't the deck that you're like, Sunset Pyramid or, something kind of cute that's like a fine card, but it doesn't really fit as well. You'd really, really much rather have anything that can attack or get in for some damage. And all of a sudden Appeal to Authority is your game finisher. It just ends the game and for very cheaply as well. So that's been impressive. Luis, have you had a chance to touch on the green-white deck more in general, and how good is it?
I think it's quite good. I think that getting access to Premier 2-drop in both of its colors is the reason it's good. It's the reason green-white would be better than something like red-white, which was the Premier aggressive deck when it was triple Amonkhet. So I have done fairly well with it. I actually... Both green-white and actually green-blue can both lend themselves to beat down if you get the right cards for it. But green-white, I think, is a lot more consistent. And I do like that you can get late picks that other people don't care about. I mean, cards like Appeal to Authority, you can get that 7th pick. It's a gold card. It's also an aggressive card. Like, I've had green-white decks that would never play that card.
Right.
So when you're the aggressive deck, it's funny, again, that scarcity of aggressive cards leads to fewer aggressive decks, which sometimes actually helps aggressive decks because there are less people competing for those same cards.
Yeah, it's like always bad if you're the second, green-white drafter, but if you're the only one, you can get a pretty good deck out of it. Another deck I wanted to talk about, if we don't have anything else for green-white or the 2-drop stuff, is the ramp deck. CFB Fire loves the ramp deck, and I don't think they're alone in that.
Oh, they're not. I was trolling the show floor today, talking with various people, and people from various teams were pretty big fans of just drafting all these like sweet, expensive cards. Take the, one unnamed player who maybe recently won a Grand Prix said, this format's perfect for you. You just take the best card out of every pack, regardless of how much it costs or what colors it is.
It's like Cube or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to splash cards in this format. I mean, Oasis Ritualist is basically the gift of paradise of this set.
Yeah.
And is often better because it gets you much higher, much faster.
Right.
And it's a 2/4 body to boot. And so that really allows you to kind of like play a lot of different cards. And as that unnamed player said, you can just take the best card at any time. And that makes you a real threat in draft.
One actual concern I heard from a different team was... I don't actually know if these decks are going to be good because I think at the Pro Tour, Manolith is not going to go late.
Wow, really? At the PT?
Yeah.
We're not talking about, a bunch of people sitting around a table going,
let's draft the sweet cards.
Yeah, this is for, and just to put it into context for the viewers that don't follow the PT as closely, this is the last Pro Tour of the season, which means that this is the last chance that the players have to get pro points, and this will lock in the level that they're at for the whole next year. So this isn't like, just some random PT. This is like one where they really need the points. And these players are seriously talking about taking these 4 to 5 color, just sort of rampy, splashy, take everything style decks. It's insane.
I mean, people flew 16 hours to be here. They're not
right.
They're not trying to draft the deck that's the most fun. They're trying to draft the deck that win the most. And that many players have concluded that playing 2 manaliths and just playing all 5 colors is actually real.
Oh yeah, for sure. And one of the features of this 5-color deck is it uses a lot of aftermath cards. So because you can play all the colors and then you can play both sides, and so you're basically getting 2 cards for 1. If you ask Ben Stark, that's exactly the way he looks at it. Also gold cards are really like much easier to put in this deck. John Finkel in his top 8 Grand Prix Kyoto actually first picked River Hoopu in both his boosters.
Yeah, he really did. It was awesome.
Yeah, and
that's John Finkel we're talking about. He's the best Magic player ever. Like, it's insane.
Yeah, he really likes these ramp decks, and he played a kind of a 3 and a bit color deck. He had 2 Hoopoos. He had a Approach a Second Sun. He did everything, really.
Oh, yeah. His deck was really sweet. And he wasn't the only one who kind of went crazy at the GP as well. And I do think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. I mean, like Luis said, he was out asking around and he was hearing that. And I've heard it myself as well. Also, I mean, I've drafted the deck. Like, I thought, well, I'll just give it a shot. And, let's talk about some of the key cards for the deck or some of the things that you should be prioritizing. Now, the first order of business, of course, are the payoffs, right? Like getting the big power level cards
of the deck.
Yeah, I think the Sifter Worm is probably the number one target as far as like the card you can get the most consistently. It's in green, which is going to be your base color, and it's an absurd payoff. I mean, that card is great, really, really, really great for a ramp deck.
Yeah, they're just really powerful. Exactly what you want. Out of a big creature in a ramp deck, because you often fall behind a little bit early because you're like casting cards like Manalith and other kind of mana producers, and so you need some way to come back a little bit. And Sifter Worm often gets you there, and filters your draw too.
Yeah, it filters. I mean, it sets you up right when. Like you said, it actually just lines up perfectly for basically everything for the ramp for all the reasons you said. And on top of it, it's like once you get to that big chunk of mana, now you're going to set up your draw where you're just not drawing lands for the next few turns probably. And that's just another huge, huge, huge bonus at that stage in the game. It all comes together perfectly with Sifter Worm. But also, I mean, you have to be willing to take basically any bomb you see, right? I mean, all the gods, any of these like big bombs like that. What about double colored spells? Like if you, let's say, open up a Glorybringer in the third pack, like is this deck able to splash those?
Well, what I often find is blue-green is one of the more common combinations, but it's really green-X, or X could be almost any other color. You want to usually have your double color spells within that X. So to give an example, you can play Glorybringer if you're like green-red and you had like, Puncturing Blow and Glorybringer and a couple of red cards, but you also had a white card and a blue card because you can splash those as well.
Okay.
You would not want to be like green-blue splash Glorybringer quite as much.
You get the Ritualist.
It is true that Oyster Ritualist and Gift of Paradise both help you cast double colored cards, but the most successful one tend to splash single colored cards. Okay. You want your one Manalith to just be able to cast all your off-color spells. You want Evolving Wilds to actually help fix you by getting your planes to cast Desert's Hold. But you don't really want double-color off-color spells as much. Though the deck can't afford that. The best versions of the deck are fine with it. In general, I found the more successful versions to be like base green, splash like 5 or 6 cards of the first color, and like 1 card of 2 other colors. Something along those lines.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the decks also can have a small desert sub-theme as well.
Right.
They often are able to pick up like a Sand Strangler that doesn't quite have a home upstream in the draft, and that's really good. Something like Rumnap Hydra is also a card that like doesn't naturally fit in a lot of decks unless, they're the actual desert deck. And so what I found was a lot of the 5-color decks have the capacity to actually play deserts as in their splash color, because if you have a Manalith, you can cycle your desert, and so that actually gives you a lot of flexibility there too. So it often has a lot of different themes. Eternalize is really good because you have a lot of mana to kind of sink into it. It somehow is able to piece together all these strategies and still have a coherent core.
What's the weakness of the deck?
You can
get ran over.
Yeah, you get run over. You can not draw your mana fixing. Those are 2 big things. Sometimes your answers don't line up that well with their threats. That happens sometimes. But in general, the reason why people like it is that it actually has a lot of flexibility and a lot of comeback. I think you can fall behind. The big spells in Hour of Devastation and Amonkhet to some extent basically allowed you to come back like a ton. Some of the cards I've seen, not just Sifter Worms, I've obviously got the gods. Nicol Bolas.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really good card in this
deck.
Oh, yeah. Godfarer's Gift is really good in this deck.
Yep, good finisher.
A card that's kind of laughable in other ones, but Overwhelming Splendor is really good in this deck because it just shuts everything off. It's just a lot of cards allow you to come back very quickly.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Like we talk about formats and the speed of them, right? How much faster and slower formats got. We've noted that this format's gotten noticeably slower. But does that just mean that you just don't plan to face these, like, for example, the green-white deck? Like, if you were going to sit down, like Luis, if you're going to sit down and you were going to play for a bunch of money or whatever, would you rather have a B version of the green-white deck or a B version of the ramp deck? And I mean, they're playing against each other, so your opponent gets the other one.
It's pretty contextual. One of the things I like about the ramp deck is like the version that has like base white, for example, has cards like Desert's Hold and Haven of Enduring Hope that do a very good job of catching it back up. They just have this incidental life gain attached. But in general, I think that I would rather be on the ramp deck side just because it's going to have a fairly powerful late game. It's going to have a lot of cards that get you there. Gift of Paradise and Oasis Ritualist both conveniently do defend you, both by either getting life or just being a 2/4 blocker.
Right.
And I like that the green-white deck, I think, is largely more consistent, the beatdown deck. But I think that the ramp deck wins with its bad draws more often. Because if you miss your 2-drop with green-white, or you draw a hand of not enough pump spells and they brick wall you with like a 4/4 on turn 5, it's harder for you to get back into that game. Whereas the ramp deck is just given enough time, it tends to do its thing, and it tends to do its thing fairly well.
Another interesting thing about the green ramp deck is that it often doesn't start off that way. You start off with a card that's the most powerful card in the pack. And then you can either go deep into that like strategy, or you can kind of back into it, the ramp deck. And so you often use it as a way to get out of a bad draft spot. And I think that's actually one of the things that the good players know. They know that by taking a very powerful but maybe kind of situational card, they can fit it in two decks, either the dedicated deck or this ramp deck. And so they're always on the lookout for, can I back into the ramp deck, or can I kind of bet more and get into the archetype that's more known?
What about the repeatable places to put your mana? How important is that? We've been kind of talking about ramping up to one huge thing, right? The Overwhelming Splendor or the God Pharaoh's Gift, and kind of being like, okay, this is going to win me the game. And those huge, powerful effects can, right? We know that they can. But, one thing that we saw was like River Hoopu, for example, in the hands of John Finkel. He was at 1 or 2 life or something and ended up at like 19 because he set up a scenario where he had barely stabilized the board, but he could start activating River Hoopu once a turn and then twice a turn after that. And there's, some amount of cards that have that. Will you see that a lot in this format? The ability to dump your mana into repeatable mana sinks rather than just something huge. Remember, we were a little light on that in Amonkhet, and people were, running 16 lands and really just felt like they didn't have any place to put their mana.
You often end up with a lot of mana in these decks, obviously, and so you want to pay off. But you don't need repeatable ones. Hoopu is obviously one of the premier way of doing it.
Oh, yeah.
But like Eternalize is generally six mana.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can get 1 or 2 of those, and that's 12 mana worth of goodness that you if you have enough of those cards that basically kind of work double duty, either Aftermath card or Eternalize card, you can kind of like fake a sink for these cards.
Okay. One of the cards I wanted to touch on that we have talked actually quite a bit about, and I don't know if we have a full update here, but I am wanting to touch on it just because it's a card we saw at the GP a lot, is Torment of Scarabs. Let's just start here. TBS, what's your take on Torment of Scarabs? The listeners know, at least ours as of last week, but I want to know where you at on that card.
So I played against it at the GP in Sealed Deck. I know we're not talking about Sealed Deck specifically today, but in Sealed, I think it's quite good. I think Sealed Decks tend to gum up in this format. They tend to, like, you kind of need a repeatable trump over to basically, like, to last long. And so we found that Torment of Scarabs is actually a tough enough choice to put you in a bind in kind of the mid to late game in Sealed Deck. I think in Draft, it's a little hit or miss. I've seen it be great. I've seen it be not good enough. It doesn't really impact the board for a while. If your deck is fast, it's actually not bad at the top of your curve, but I don't think it's something that I would naturally kind of want to be putting into into draft unless I really had a dedicated plan to try and put the opponent into a kind of a tight squeeze by being very aggressive.
Luis, have you changed your tune at all on that card? We were kind of medium minus on it still before, though we did figure it had a little bit more of a place in the format than maybe we originally thought.
Not particularly. I think it is a good point drawing the distinction between draft and sealed because TBS makes good points about how good it is in sealed. But in draft, I've still found this card to really be hit or miss, and more often on the miss side. Just if you're not aggressive, I just don't think this card is particularly good.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's the kind of card people tend to overestimate.
Yeah, I definitely I've been playing on Magic Online a fair bit. I've still been drafting that blue-red deck I was really high on. I still think it's really good. Some of these green-white style decks I've had as well. And whenever it's happened, whenever my opponents played that, the Tournament of Scarabs, I felt a sigh of relief sort of wash over me because it just meant I was going to get in for so much more damage. And then I had a very slow, like River Hoopu style deck that it was the weirdest thing. I think I drafted it like when I was either trying to like falling asleep or maybe on an airplane or something like that, because I just hit play and I started playing and I like had a River Hoopu in my opener and I hadn't had one yet. And I'm like, oh, sweet. I drafted a River Hoopu. This is awesome. And then I started playing and then like I went to sideboards and I'm like, hey, TBS, how should I sideboard here? And he's like, well, you should probably put that, green on-color Cycle Desert in your deck for starters. And I'm like, wait, what? And I look and there's like 3 cards that should have been in the main and I couldn't figure it out. But the point is that my opponent played the Tournament of Scarabs against me and I had River Hoopu and I'm just like, don't care, and just started drawing cards and gaining life. And there's just, even that deck didn't care about it. Now I mentioned it on last week's show. I have lost to the card. It's not that it does nothing. It's just, I think it doesn't do quite enough. I'm going to quiz you guys on a couple of cards that listeners, or a couple of picks that listeners have asked me about in the on Twitter and that kind of thing. The first one I have is Ambuscade versus Open Fire. TBS, which one do you take?
I'll take Open Fire, but it's really close. Ambuscade has the highest ceiling. It can create a lot of blowouts, but I think I'd rather be in red as a default. And it's more flexible, and going to the face is actually pretty useful too. So I go there, but it's really close, and I don't think there's a wrong pick there. At least first pick, first pack.
What do you think, Luis?
Yeah, there's a wrong pick, and that's Open Fire. So I would definitely take.
Shots open fired. What's your thoughts?
I would take Ambuscade. I actually do think it's very close, but I couldn't resist. So I like the flexibility to be able to kill larger creatures. I value that fairly highly, and I have not found that you end up getting blown out by opposing removal spells. There just aren't that many great fast removal spells that you end up in a spot where you can usually fairly safely cast this, and it does a very good job of killing even larger things.
All right, I'm on Team Open Fire here, though I agree with both of these guys that it's very, very, very close. And I think if you flip the coin, you probably wouldn't be making a big mistake either way. All right, how about this one? Earthshaker Kenra versus Eternal of Harsh Truths. So Earthshaker Kenra, for those that didn't remember, is the rare, though it looks kind of more like an uncommon. It's a 1 and a red for a 2/1 with haste. When it enters a battlefield, you can have target creature not be able to block as long as its power is less than or equal to that of Earthshaker Kenra, and you can also eternalize it for 4 blue. And of course, Eternal of Harsh Truths is the 2 and a blue 1/3 with a flick 2, and whenever it doesn't get blocked, you can draw a card.
You Eternals are 4 red, but anyway.
4 red. Sorry, what did I say?
Blue.
Did I say blue? Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
It's late.
I would take Earthshaker Kenra. I just think that the payoff at 6 mana is worth it. Though I do like Eternal of Heart Truth. I think that card's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm with Luis as much as he hung me out to dry in the last pick.
Begrudgingly agree.
Yeah, it's a 2-drop. The Eternalize is really relevant. Eternal's a 3-drop, which you tend to flood. There seem to be a lot of 3-drops in this format, so you tend to have that mana cost covered. That being said, I actually prefer blue cards. I think blue is the best color in Hour of Devastation. But
you think blue's just the straight up best?
Yes, but I think that pick kind of is more on the 2-drop side than the color side.
Interesting. I like that. I take the Earthshaker Kenner as well. I'm such a sucker for good early, good late. I just can't help myself from picking some of those type of cards. Let's see. I had another one that I wanted to ask you about. I'll have to come back to it because I don't have it in front of me at the moment. All right. So, okay. TBS. There's a card. I don't think we gave it a very high grade. Let's just put it that way. Called Leave to Chance in the set. And I've noticed that you've been trying to make that card work, and you have some arcane force behind you. What has been going on with? I just got to hear this story.
So I was at GP Kyoto last week, and I was talking to Chris Piccola, and he gave me this story where he lost to his opponent who had a Cunning Survivor, I think that's the name of the creature.
Mm-hmm.
It's
the 1/3.
Yeah, it's a 1/3 for blue and 1. And if you cycle or discard a card, it gets +1 power and unblockable. So anyway, he lost to his opponent, basically having this out, and then casting Leave, returning all his permanents to his hand, then Chance, then triggering the Cunning Survivor for all his cards, all his permanents. And so he basically got killed out of nowhere. And I heard this, and this was excited me to no end. And I really, really wanted to draft a deck that have Lead to Chance and all the discard triggers. So later I told the story to Brian David Marshall, BDM, and his eyes lit up too. And so we were like...
This is right up his alley.
Oh yeah, we were kind of like giddy with the opportunity to actually use this card. So we actually created a challenge to each other where it was like, who was the first person who could send a screenshot to the other person, basically having lethal amount of damage because of a Lead to Chance. And he basically did it on his first draft. It was not fair. I was sightseeing somewhere, and he sent it to me on Twitter and said, like, look at this. And he had this picture of his Shadowstorm Vizier, the black-blue card from Amonkhet, that
right.
also triggers off discarding and cycling, and he had done it for like 20. He also had Locust God in his deck, so he actually could have made... Apparently, in his game 1, he actually made like 20 Locusts as well. It was crazy.
He got you.
Yes.
Let's just put it that way.
I'm really sad, and so I really, really want to be the first person to actually be able to do that. But, you know, it was fun with license. I'm still going to always try and draft this deck because I think it's hilariously fun.
I think it's pretty sweet too. Yeah. You know, I've learned that doing these crazy things isn't quite as hard, you know, to pull off like once. Usually you make your deck a lot worse doing it. But, you know, I remember when Imminent Doom, we rated that, and I mentioned on the set review show, hey, if you happen to like go up to 7 or whatever with Imminent Doom, send me a screenshot. And I swear to God, the first day the set was out on Magic Online, I had a screenshot on my email from a listener who was like, I did it. Just like, what the heck? Like, they wasted no time. And it, sure enough, had 7 counters on it.
That card is actually playable, by the way.
Is it actually okay?
I don't think it's good, but I think in blue-red, if you have Unsummon, is as an actual good 1-drop and a curve that goes up.
How many unsummons?
You want like 3 1-drops. They don't have to be unsummons. That just happens to be a very good one.
Yeah, that one fits perfectly, actually, right?
The card actually can perform. It is actual high upside. It's just pretty hard to get going.
Yeah, I just hate the idea that I just don't happen to have the unsummon in my hand, and now I'm just sitting there begging my deck to produce this unsummon, and then like, do you keep the 2-drop in your hand while you're do you cast strategic planning?
You do want to wait on that. I mean, you want your 2 to trigger Imminent Doom.
No, so let's say you go Imminent Doom, go. You don't have a 1-drop. You have strategic planning, no other 2s in your hand. You're just like, well, here we go. You cast it to find your 1, and now you don't have a 2 anymore. Like,
it would depend on the board.
It makes me queasy.
Nothing better to do, I would cast it. But otherwise, I'd probably wait.
Yeah, I've had a couple drafts with it. It's actually been really good. I mean,
it was really good.
Yeah, really good. Like
what?
I mean, I've had the good situations. I mean, I had a blue-red deck with Unsummon. We had Crash Through as another 1-drop because it's kind of low downside because it just cycles.
Yeah, those are the 2 cards that come to mind when I think of the ones that you want.
Right, but you end up usually having about like 5 things that cost 2. So I don't think you should hold back your 2. I think you'll have a chance of drawing it. The key is if you actually like get a bunch of counters on it, it dominates the board. It really is hard for opponent to actually keep things on the board while there's a Doom ticking up. I'm not saying it's something you should always draft, but you should, when you see it late in the draft, sometimes you should pick it up, have a look at your curve. Maybe you can kind of like choose your numbers basically to make sure that you cover everything. It's one of those things that has a high upside, and the cost is one card. And one card can be high, you can lose a match or a game, like drawing it in a bad situation. But sometimes you'll win matches you can't possibly win.
Okay, yeah. I would not try that at home. That sounds way too scary, but it is sweet when it goes off for sure. And like both of you said, the upside is very real. TBS, were there anything else that jumped out to you about maybe the pick orders or some of the cards or some of the things that you saw from your testing with CFB Fire?
No, I think one of the things that is important is just to be very aware about deserts. I think that's
okay.
That's one thing that I see that a lot of players don't quite get, and that I've seen CFB Fire make sure that deserts were an important part of their pick order. They always had them kind of in the middle, but towards the top. Most of the payoffs are very, like, they're worth their payoff.
Right.
Especially, obviously, a card like Sand Strangler is amazing if you get enough deserts. But even things like Unquenchable Thirst and Desert's Hold, and then even Sidewinder Naga is worth it. The Camels are some. But because the cards that you play that require deserts basically go from mediocre to very good very quickly. But if you don't have any deserts, it really, really is a drag to draw some of those cards. So you want to make sure that you have access to about 3 to 4 deserts, as long as you have about 2 to 3 of those payoff cards.
And you really do kind of have to get those taken care of in the first 2 packs, right? Like the deserts and Amonkhet are pretty bad.
Yes, I would try not to play Amonkhet deserts. I mean, sometimes you have to.
Sure.
Sometimes you have.
Oh man, I get Cradle of the Kirsten all the time. that one's actually
that is
fun.
the best one. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, well, I guess Painted Bluffs is probably better.
Sunscorched Desert's just so bad. Like you have to have Sand Strangler if you want that card in your deck. Yeah, it's playable, but it's just not good.
So bad.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of that. Did you have anything else?
No.
The desert? Okay, Luis, what's the best uncommon in the set? I have Sand Strangler right now.
Yeah, that's the one I would like to start with the most. It's a little tricky because that's not a card you can always get max value out of. But if you're talking pick one, pack one, I think Sand Strangler for sure.
What did CFB Fire have to say about that? You know, they'll lay out the cards in kind of an order, but you know, there's a lot of nuance to it. But did they think that Sand Strangler was the best uncommon as well? TBS?
Yeah. I mean, I think in the dark it would be Sand Strangler. They did have 4 other cards that were of similar power level.
Okay, so not necessarily in order, but at least grouped where you would pick them in the same spot you would a Strangler?
Yeah, so the 4 cards are Desert's Hold, which is fair enough, it's pretty close to power level. Struggle, another removal spell, also high upside in power level.
Yeah, we compared that to Terminate when we were chatting the other day.
Yeah, Abrade, probably the most efficient removal spell in the set. So, so those are 3 kind of understandable ones.
Right.
But the surprising one to me that they had high was Burning Fist Minotaur.
Oh, the 2
mana 2/1. Yeah, first strike. Yeah.
But it's 2-drop, right? I mean, that's kind of like what jumps, like given what we talked about earlier.
It's a 2-drop that you can't block in the middle of the game.
Right.
At any point.
Yeah. And funnily enough, its range from when you can't block it to when you have to block it is really close. Often you get in you get in some chip damage, and then they'll have 8 mana or 6 mana up, and then you have to start chump blocking it at 6 mana and they have a bunch of cards. So because you could easily just die to it just by them dumping their hand.
That's the thing that didn't occur, at least to me upon first seeing it. Right, with these cards that require you to discard as part of the ability, a lot of times you're like, well, I don't want to block because they're just going to discard some junky card I don't care about, and then my creature's going to trade. And you're like, at some point, you're like, okay, you know what? I will block, and I'll just take my medicine here. You have to discard something, but our creatures will trade off. But they don't trade. Like, you lose your onboard creature that you spent mana on, to get on the battlefield, and they're paying a couple of mana and discarding a card to just kill it. And their creature stays and is going to come back again. And that, when you play against it, you're like, oh, wait, like, I don't want to chump, right? Like, I don't want to just throw, like, I want you to pay the mana. I want you to discard cards, but I don't want to throw away my onboard presence for it. So I'm not super shocked to see it there, though. It does seem like it's not quite as good as these, top tier removal spells that we saw.
Yeah, I think it's the combination of being 2-drop as well. It probably, if it came in the same pack, that would take Sand Strangler, so I don't think it comes to that. But it's a card that...
It's in the same tier, at the very least.
It is in the same tier.
Yeah, for sure. T-Bits, did you get a sense for what the team thought were the best cards, full stop, in the format? Like, what is the stuff that they thought, okay, this is the... windmill slam, never pass, that type of thing?
Yeah, so they have a kind of a set of cards that are of that. Some of them are really obvious. The 3 gods are there.
Yep.
Nicol Bolas is there. These are huge upside cards. Cards that are really efficient. The Kestis Last Word, Grind to Dust. These are cards that are just powerful removal spells. They have a Dorn Pouncer. I think that this card is good on both sides. It's good as it's essentially a 2-drop that has a huge upside.
Yeah.
It eternalizes for very cheap, actually. Cheaper than the other ones for 5.
Cheaper, yeah.
Full mana is worth it. And then they have a couple cards that are really good, like, if you can keep them on the table. One is the Angel of Condemnation. One is the Pride Sovereign. Those are cards that they can gain... Like, if you don't kill them immediately...
They just dominate the board.
Yes, they dominate the board. There's a couple interesting ones. There's the Cryosphinx. Unesh. And there's the Horsemaker. It's the Crested
Sunmare, yeah.
And the Chimera. The green Chimera.
Majestic Myriarch.
Yes, Majestic Myriarch. Now, these are just big... creatures that can kind of punch through. Generally pretty good for their mana cost.
Okay, yeah, that's good stuff. Did you note what the highest common was, or if there was a grouping of commons that was highest? I'm just curious to see. It tells you a lot about how a team sees it if you can get that info.
Yeah, they have a group of 3 commons. There's Oketra's Avenger. We talked about.
Yep.
Open Fire, which you also talked about, and Ambuscade. So those 3 cards are really their top commons.
But really, like, when you hear Oketra's Avenger in that pile, that's very telling, right? Because the other 2 are like premium removal spells that, I think most of our listeners would go, well, these are probably in some of the best commons in the set, or at least they're on the short list, right? But Oketra's Avenger could range from very, very good to pretty good to, this isn't really so much of a fast 2-drop set. We don't need this card that much. And to see it, even grouped in that group, even if it's maybe the third of the group, or maybe it's not, that really is telling about at least how CFB Fire came down on the format with these 2-drops.
Yeah, it's a card that keeps on attacking, and it's really hard to basically decide to block it.
Yes.
Because even in a situation where you have, let's say, a 2/4, and they've attacked and exerted it, a lot of times they're going to have a trick.
Yes.
So they put you to the test all the time, and I think that's what's good about that card.
Yeah, and then, of course, the times when your opponent's going a little slowly, it just hits for 3. Really hard. No exert needed if your opponent's off to a slow start. Okay, so what are our takeaways here? TBS, what would you say the big picture things are that you took from your part in this?
Yeah, as we said, the 2-drops, really important. I think mana sinks for the ramp deck's really important. Making sure that you actually have enough deserts, also really important. And making sure that your draft can kind of flex into spots. I think knowing when that you should become a dedicated 2-color deck, or sometimes moving into the 5-color deck, because you can always start off as a 2-color deck, and you can always move into the 5-color deck if you see a late Oasis Ritualist or Manalist or something else like that.
One of the things I think is key is when you're drafting a green-white deck or any other aggressive deck, pretty obvious that you need 2-drops, right?
Right.
If you don't have those, you're not going to be a very good aggressive deck. Great. Most people get that. One thing that I want to warn people about is when you're drafting these ramp decks, which I do think are quite good, make sure you actually have real payoffs. If your payoff is like, a pair of, random 6 drops, like, you have a
couple of hippos or whatever.
You have a couple of hippos. You're going to lose to the person who's got a Nicole Bolas. You're going to lose to the person who has 2 Sifter Worms. You're going to lose to the person who just splashing 4 good removal spells and has like Majestic Mirror Arc or something. So make sure you have actual payoffs, because you can't build it. You can't have a ramp deck that's designed to go to the late game and not actually have the payoffs. So make sure that just as you would have enough 2 drops to build an aggro deck, you actually have 2 to 3 really good payoffs if you have a ramp deck. You don't just automatically win if you get Manalith and a couple Oasis Ritualists, but you don't really have a place to go once you have those.
Okay, so you have to pay attention to that balance as you're going through the draft where, okay, I need to get the payoffs. Okay, I need to make sure I can actually cast them, so I'll take the ramp. And that is, of course, the delicate balance that you always find. And for the love of all things, take the River Hoopus.
Yeah, River Hoopu is what I would consider a payoff.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, that's good. We got the insider info from TBS and Luis on this one. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. Ben, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was awesome to have you on for the first time. I'm sure it won't be your last. Where can people find you if they want to maybe say hi or whatever it is that you have going on?
Yeah, I'm at TBS- on Twitter. That's probably the best place to find me. So,
are you nice on Twitter or mean on Twitter?
I'm pretty nice. I try. I try to be the anti LSV.
You don't troll people all day. Yes. I get it.
Wow, you must be incredibly lucky.
That's great. And again, thank you for taking the time to come on the show. We really appreciate it.
It was fun. Great.
If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. Super easy. We'll be back home again next week and back into our regular swing of things after coming back from Japan here and after the Pro Tour. I want to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com, one more time here. If you need anything Magic related, we highly recommend checking out channelfireball.com for all of that. I mentioned the singles. You can fill out your standard deck or modern deck or Canadian Highlander, whatever it is that you need. They're going to have full selection. Of course, they stand by their product. They're going to make sure it gets shipped out quickly to you and that you're going to be well taken care of. You're going to be happy with channelfireball.com. I am confident of that. So please do check them out. That's going to do it for this one. We will see you next week. But until then, we're signing off from Japan. Okay. TBS. Story time with TBS begins now.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I get the chance to do the sign off. My story actually starts in the early 2000s, so this is a pretty old story. I've been playing for a while, but one of the first times that I actually had a significant kind of connection to like the pro Magic community was when they used to have a tournament called the Magic Invitational.
This is the one where you get the card made from you, right?
That's right. Cards like Meddling Mage, Void Mage Prodigy, Shadow Mage Infiltrator, Snapcaster. So it came from this tournament. So anyway, I was living in Australia. I live in the States now, but I used to be living in Sydney, Australia. And they brought the Magic Invitational into town. And so there's all these pros. There was like John Finkel, Kai Bude. They all came, descended on Sydney. And one of the formats for that Magic Invitational was vintage. So
wow,
it was, 16 players needed to get vintage cards. And I actually happen to know some of these guys. Basically, I used to hang out on some message boards and IRC channels with them. So I was kind of like, trying to like ingratiate myself with some of the pros, and I helped them get all these like vintage cards.
You helped them source them, locally from Australia.
Well, yeah, I actually had some myself, and I had some friends who I borrowed from. I actually borrowed from some friends to lend to these pros. Anyway, long story short, they were all very, very thankful for me doing that. Fast forward, they used to do this event once a year, and so fast forward a year later, and it's almost time for the Magic Invitational. And this time it was going to be in Cape Town, South Africa. And that was like, really, really far off place. They'd never done something like that there. And
Nor since.
And again, they were going to have a format. It wasn't actually vintage, but it was a format, kind of like Highlander, but vintage-ish. And Kai, who I'd lent cards to the previous year, said, "Hey, man, can you lend me cards again this year?" And I said, "Well, it's not in Sydney. I live in Sydney. I can't give you the cards because, I don't own these all.
I'm not in Africa
I'm
right
not
now.
in Africa." And then he said, "Well, what if I fly you to Africa?" What if I fly you to Africa? You can bring the cards I need. At the time, whenever they had a Magic Invitational, they have a Grand Prix associated with it.
Okay, so that you could travel and do both. Okay,
right. So some of the local players, some people can travel, and they could see the event. So I said, okay, that's fine. So he said, what I'll do is I'll fly you over. You can play in the Grand Prix. If you make money in the Grand Prix, you can pay me some back. And if you don't, that's cool. It's on me. And he said, you can crash my room, and this will be. And so I was like,
wow.
Okay, well, I'm not going to, look a gift horse in the mouth. This seemed like a great trip I could take. So he gets me a ticket.
He actually did this.
Yeah,
he bought you a ticket.
He bought a ticket, and the ticket was like $1,500. This is not a small. So I mean,
he was very thankful. Wow.
I mean, by then we'd become good friends, so it's kind of like he was doing a solid for a friend.
Fair.
So he flies me over.
Is this whole story just to brag about being friends with Kai?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's all this was.
It is. So he flies me over. I gave him the cards for his event. He wins his Magic Invitational.
He
wins it.
This is the one that became Void Mage Prodigy?
Void Mage Prodigy. He wins it.
Wow.
So obviously the cards were pretty lucky, but also I win the Grand Prix associated with it. So we both go back to our bedrooms. We have two trophies on the table, and it's like, this worked out as good as we possibly could.
That is completely insane.
But what was actually really interesting was it was the first time that they had a Grand Prix in South Africa. So things were a little bit kind of seat of the pants. And they hadn't really worked out, the local authorities hadn't worked out how to pay international players. They were expecting to have to play only local players, and they had a way of doing that.
Okay.
So the TO said, hey, we don't have a way to pay you. But what if you come up to the hotel room, my hotel room, and I'll pay you in cash?
What?
So I was completely incredulous. He said, yeah, no, we have the money in South African Rand, which is the currency.
Yeah.
So I went up to the TO's hotel room. He goes into the safe, pulls out a suitcase, counts out to me the Grand Prix winnings, hands it to me in an envelope.
What the hell?
And so I think I'm the only Grand Prix winner to get paid in cash at the tournament.
Wow. Did you hand the money right to Kai for
the funny thing is, the tournament was also in a casino. We were all celebrating.
This is the sketchiest ever.
We were all celebrating so much after the event. Kai's happy, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I double my money. I basically get 2 Grand Prix wins on the blackjack table. I give Kai his half, and I still get to keep a whole Grand Prix win.
Wow, TVS, you really did it.